May I have your kind attention, please? For the show is about to begin. I would like to I'd like to request everyone to switch off your mobiles. Since we are also going live on YouTube, I would request everyone to maintain the decorum as well. So I would also request the alumni who have joined us through YouTube to drop in the questions, if any, in the YouTube live chat box, which will be picked up in the end. Good evening to one and all present. We, the guest lecture committee, bring to you the third conversation under Careers and Conversations, an elite and exclusive platform to rendezvous with eminent speakers from different walks of life, reminiscing about their personal and professional voyages. This platform aims to provide ample learning opportunities through real-life stories to faculty, students, and alumni alike. Today, we ponder on the topic of data and human intelligence with one such personality. Data is not just a collection of numbers, it's a story awaiting to be told. Analytics is the microscope that unveils its secrets and empowers us to make informed decisions. Nobody knows this better than our beloved guest of the day. I would now request my co-host Ashmita to shed some light about him.
Thank you, Sharath. So today, on the third conversation, it is our honor to host and converse with Mr. Ranjit Pawar, Managing Director, Data and Analytics for London Stock Exchange Group, who has orchestrated the symphony of understanding the raw information. Sir is an electronics engineer by qualification and has over 17 years of experience as a senior leader in the information solution space across financial, risk, legal, and accounting solutions. He has a professional relationship team handling key accounts in banking, advisory, wealth management, insurance, and corporate segments of the financial services industry. He believes in focusing on creating a customer-first culture based on open and mutually beneficial relationships with clients. The conversation will be led by Mr. Arun Thukral, sir, our guest lectures committee faculty head, who is a professor of practice in finance and leads corporate relations at KJSIM Institute of Management. Now I would like to hand over the stage to Arun, sir, to begin our session on data and human intelligence.
Thank you, Ashmita. Good afternoon. We are truly honored and privileged to gather here today for a thought-provoking conversation with an industry leader who has been at the forefront of revolutionizing the data analytic landscape in financial services. We will know more about that from the guest. Without further ado, please join me in extending a warm welcome to Ranjit. Thank you, Ranjit, for gracing us today with your presence, and looking forward to a lot of insightful discussion today. So let me start, Ranjit. How did you get started in the industry? Like transition from an electronic engineer and getting into financial service industries. What were the choices available? How you decided? Maybe a little bit on that. We start from there.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's probably 2 days in a row that I'm going to say I really don't know if I deserve it. But thank you so much for putting me up here, and I do hope I do justice to the opportunity to talk to so many young people here. And I said this because tomorrow morning I'm speaking at a wealth tech event. I have nothing to do with wealth or with tech, but I'm still speaking there. And sometimes I think it's just a collective experience that you can share with people, and people can draw insights from that. So I hope I do justice there as well tomorrow. But to just answer your question, I think we can plan everything that we would like, but it doesn't necessarily go that way. And it's a little bit of that, in my case, where I did my engineering when my heart was actually in liberal arts. But that was the period, right, where all the big IT firms were making their presence felt. today's, IT poster boys, as they're called, the Infosys and the TCSs and the Wipros of the world were just about emerging. And for people who were in the 90s, they'll recall that was the era where engineers were also being produced by, the thousands in this country. And every other person who was scoring above a certain range in their 10th or their 12th grade was either going for engineering or going for medicine. Something like liberal arts didn't even exist back then. There was arts, but people used to look down upon arts. Somebody who wanted to be a lawyer would generally do arts because how else do you get into law college, right? That was the only kind of thinking at that point. It's changed drastically now, and I'll talk a bit about that later. So for me, it wasn't so much of a decision that I made to go into engineering. All my friends from school, we all scored well in our HSE. Everybody was around 90%, and it seemed like the most natural thing to do. Go and apply in the engineering colleges and, find a job, salary, whatever. In my case, it wasn't post-engineering so much of, looking for a job. I actually wanted to do my master's in communication, and I applied in Xavier's and I got through. I also, in parallel, applied, did my CAT, and I got into one of the reputed, Mumbai MBA colleges. And it was a bit of a choice. Should I go do my, mass comm, or should I go and do my MBA? Actually, I did neither. I actually started working. So my father asked me the question that, is your heart really into doing an MBA and entering a corporate? And I said, no. So he said, then, why don't you just work with me? And I was like, okay, somebody's offering you a job, and I knew it was going to be difficult. I don't know if anybody in this room's worked with their fathers and in their father's business. It's not the easiest thing to do, because from day one, you're expected to know everything. There is no honeymoon period. There is no first 3 months of training. The first day, you are made to work as much as your father does, probably more, and that's what my dad did with me. So suddenly, from engineering, I was in a media room, editing or overseeing, how documentaries are edited. He used to do a lot of production work for industries ranging from consumer to agri-input to electronics. He used to produce television serials for, Doordarshan and other channels. And I was suddenly sitting there, doing media production. So completely, sort of uncharted territory. But I had grown up seeing it, so I can't say uncharted. So I worked with him for a few years. Then the world around me started changing, because mobile was, making its presence felt. And it seemed to me at that point that the future of content would not remain on media like television. It would move very fast to mobile. And mobility was very attractive. If some of you might recall, VAS used to be a big field, value-added services. And so many engineers, landed in mobile VAS actually. They didn't have much to do with the VAS part of it, but because they were engineers. So I got a similar, offer from one of my dad's friends actually. He was starting his own venture, and he said, why don't you join me? And it was a bit awkward moving out of my father's business into his friends, but it was a great opportunity, and my father was very open to it. He said, if that's what you think is the future, go for it. You can always come back if you'd like. And that's how my professional journey actually began, in a sense. From there, I learned a lot about mobile operator networks, about how, applications are built. We used to sell ringtones, which this generation doesn't even probably know what it means. But these are, film tunes that used to ring on your phone, and people used to pay for it, if you believe it. So that was the second most, sold product after SMS. So 90% of VAS revenue was people sending text messages. 10% was ringtones and other things. So I started in that sector. A little bit of my, experience with media helped me. I was working on one of the very first mobile applications that would run on data. And that time, believe me, data on mobile was so thin that you could at best send, a fax over it. You couldn't send even like a full MP3 song over it. And we were trying to, work on encoding. Today, people who kind of dabble in media platforms would know how much encoding has gained importance. So Netflix today works better than any other platform, video platform, because of the encoders that they use. So we were working with a Spanish team in Gurgaon, trying to crack, with this little bandwidth, can we encode content better to get it through, the mobile somehow and sell, video content. And this is 2004-5, people didn't even have smartphones yet, and we were trying something very futuristic. While I was doing that, I got a call from Reuters. Actually, I got a call from Radio City. They hired me, and Reuters was also trying to hire me the same time, because both companies wanted a mobile content manager. It was a small pool of people in those days. You didn't have so many of us. And I was obviously very enamored by the Reuters offer. I mean, Reuters, huge brand, global. Everybody in my generation used to see Reuters alongside PTI in the newspapers. So it was so fascinating. But Reuters was so slow to send me the offer letter, that Radio City sent me the offer letter first and I joined. And my first job was, how can we sell content made by radio? So vague, I mean, I actually didn't know what I'm going to do there. But my boss was like a really amazing guy, Himan Jain. He went on to lead Hangama Mobile, and today he's the digital head for Lokmat Group. He worked with me first week. We started putting the strategy together, and then comes the Reuters offer letter. And I was so confused. I was like, what do I do? I wanted to be here a week ago, but now it's come a week later. So I went to Hemant and said, I want to confess that I've got this offer letter. Now, what do I do? He said, what are you thinking? You should go. And I was like, really? Like, in a week's time, is it not very unethical to just, walk out of a contract that you've signed just now? He said, okay, let's go to the CEO. So there was a lady running Radio City then. I think she still runs it. Apurva Bhargav, if I'm not wrong. I've forgotten her last name. And she also looked at the offer letter, and she was also so kind. She said, no, this doesn't happen, too many times in your life. Just go for it. We are okay with it. And that's how I landed in Reuters. Reuters wanted to do something very, very different. They were catering to institutional customers for all their, history of 200 years. There was a thought that, can we go retail? Can we go to the agri sector and do something with the producers in the commodities chain and then come upward all the way to the financial institutions? So they wanted somebody who understood mobile, somebody who understood content, and somebody who had some experience with agri, working with my dad, working with, Oxygen, where I worked on the mobile apps, and, a bit of 7 days experience with Radio City. I think all the dots connected in my favor, because I didn't know when I was, working with my dad that I would ever get to know so much about agriculture industry, because all his clients were primarily agri-input industries, from, Syngenta to those sort of brands. So I had good understanding because of that, the 3 years that I worked there, and then mobile. And that's how the dots connected. I couldn't have imagined that Reuters would want a guy with these two experiences. I mean, you've worked with our company closely, finance is what people look for in Reuters when they hire. But yeah, I got hired in Reuters. And from there on, it's been a journey of 17 years nearly. Yeah, almost now. So, and it's all been different fields within the company again. Started with content for agri-commodities. I built the first agri-commodity data sourcing network in India. We were covering at 1,100 locations across the country. And I don't know if any of you have ever walked into an APMC. There's one in Vashi, which is huge. Don't think of that. The APMCs in the far-off places are really tiny, and it's a complete chaos. And you have to now collect accurate data from there and make sure, it's near real time and it reaches your users the time that, the trades are happening. So nobody had done this before, so nobody knew how to do it. So we literally set up the first agri data sourcing network. That experience was fantastic, first 3 years. From there I moved into the legal data and software business of Thomson Reuters. By then we had become Thomson Reuters. I did 3 years there. I was selling software to all the big law firms in Mumbai and Delhi, from your Amarchants to AZBs to even the judiciary, Mumbai High Court, Delhi High Court. I had a fascinating 3 years understanding how our law system works, legal system, and especially the judiciary. I met so many high courts. I can tell you I met 16 high courts in India. And I think except for the Guwahati High Court, I've met every high court and tried to sell the idea that, automate, make data available, make it transparent. Very difficult because they have so much bureaucracy, right? It's not easy to just change things, but now things have started changing. A lot of high courts are implementing what we were advocating back then. And while I was at it, I got an offer from our Singapore business to move there and work in the market development space for large banks. And that was my first true tryst with, banking. So that's why I always tell people, as a disclaimer, I'm not a finance guy. So please don't ask me finance questions. I am just a business guy. But I learned over the last, 6 years quite a lot about how our customers, run their business, where do we play a role, what really matters to them. And our customers were pretty much your background, right? All the treasury heads. So I've learned a lot from my customers actually, more than anyone else. And yeah, that's how my career kind of, moved in a pretty zigzag fashion, I must say.
I think very interesting. I was thinking what questions to ask you. What you have not done. I think that's what I thought I should change my question. But I was thinking that you are sitting in swanky offices and selling all these subscription-based services and all that. But the way you have explained, I think that's all our young audience should know that just being a finance guy or an MBA would not ensure success. Yeah. So we'll come to that later. Before that, let me get into your field. So the topic today is data and human intelligence. So how do you envision the data insights and human intelligence shaping the future of financial decision making in industry as a whole and then within London Stock Exchange? How you do that?
Sure. I think it's a very, it's a very common question that comes up everywhere today, that is data kind of, becoming overwhelming? Is data sort of, too much for us to handle? And I think all of us face that even in our day-to-day lives. So it's not just about financial business or markets. I think everywhere. I mean, the amount of content available today to select from, even if you decide, I want to read a article, on wealth tech, right? I have a session tomorrow. I was trying to research. It's so difficult today to kind of, come down, narrow down to what will really deliver meaningful insights to you. And the same happens to every professional. So to your question, I think human intelligence or intelligence itself, is getting redefined. Until, say, a few decades ago, an intelligent person was somebody who was carrying a lot of degrees from different universities, somebody who was really good at math or science or law, right? These were subject domains that people could measure somebody's intelligence with. I think that's changing. Today, intelligence is whether you can do the same job in a more efficient way, whether you can deliver a perspective, to the person sitting across the table, whether you can bring some new insights into a conversation. I think that is how people are differentiating, people. And I don't mean that, somebody who can't do this is not intelligent. I think we should respect everybody's intelligence. I mean, increasingly research shows, how intelligent animals are, right? I mean, we tend to think, humans are the only intelligent creatures, but that's not true. So I think we should also have a healthy respect for different types of intelligence, but broadly, in the very conventional sense, I think intelligence is getting redefined itself. So human intelligence is no longer about IQ alone. You all have probably been taught and learned that EQ is becoming equally important, right? So I think it's a combination of multiple things that today forms human intelligence. Now coming to the data side of things, when I joined Reuters, the first thing my manager taught me, and I'm very grateful, to having some fantastic managers throughout my career. He came from London Business School. He was a very structured thinker. And he taught me structure, actually. I'd never even come across the concept so closely. But the way he taught me, he said, you've joined a data company. And this is how data works. And he drew, a pyramid. And many of you, would have probably seen this pyramid, but for those of you who haven't. So he put, data right at the bottom. And then he drew another line and put, information in there. And then he drew one more line and put analysis or analytics. And then he put, insights. And on top of that, at the peak, he put advisory. And he said, this is where we have to reach. We are right now here. We are at data. But we have to reach advisory. And believe me, this is 2007. 2023, I think we are there, right? If you today just open the papers and nobody opens the paper now, just open, your Google or whatever you use and just type in, Robo advisory, right? Or type in wealth, intelligent this. Everything has moved to the advisory level already. In 2007, it was like a dream that can machines ever, advise people? But machines are advising people. And not just, in the financial markets. I mean, machines are advising people on the most important choices in their lives. People today, decide what kind of medical treatment to take, looking at, the information available. Today, people, look at even making life choices like partners with what machines are advising you, right? It's not any longer just a human decision. The machines are so involved in, who you decide to spend your time with, who are your friends. Everything is, being advised by machines. So I think human intelligence, therefore, is getting redefined. I don't think data is truly speaking of much value. And I'm very conscious while saying that because we sell data, in a large way. But even we are being compelled to move away from selling commoditized data. And it has its own place. So you will still need, to know what's the stock price of a particular company today. But you can't do much with just the price. You need, insights. You need analytics to actually go and trade and make a profit in the market. So selling data isn't interesting. Just the way, using data isn't interesting to people. So we are also forced to think beyond it. And therefore, I think the question of, data and human intelligence, I think both are getting redefined. But data, I think, is a very commoditized concept now. Anybody can produce data. If you would like to, tomorrow start giving out stock prices, I'm telling you, you can actually start doing it. It's not difficult. All you have to do is invest in technology, get a connection with an exchange, and there you are. But what do you do after that? Nobody wants to buy it. People want to buy something on top of it. So I think that's how it's getting redefined.
So one question here, you talked about robo advisory. So robo advisory, you have a search engine, you will put all the rules and machine would tell you and you will see your own data. Suppose you are a customer, how old you are, when you got married, what are the assets and all that, and they'll give a financial plan. But sometime in India, now I'm comparing India versus global.
Yeah.
In India, if the market crashes, in Indian market, it's still a human assisted model. They want some advisor to talk to them and assure them the market will come up and all that. So how much we have adopted the robo advisory vis-a-vis the West? Like there everything is machine. Here still the role of advisor, role of human intelligence or human. So are we progressing there or we away from there, like it will take time to reach there? What stage we are?
Yeah, I mean, you've worked far closer, with this space than I have.
I wanted to know your views. Your views.
So, I'll definitely share my views. I think we underestimate, the level to which people still place their trust on people. when it comes especially to making financial decisions. And I think the reason for it is that trust between man and machine isn't in the financial space. I'm just talking specifically, to making financial decisions. It hasn't become that strong yet for them to completely overlook, what a human advisor is telling them and do exactly what the machine is saying. But having said that, the human advisor is also compelled to depend on a machine to tell them what they should be telling their customer. So there is no advisor worth his salt today who doesn't use a good, model, a good machine learning model or a good data science model to arrive at what advice they should give to their customers. There are, of course, there are many old school advisors even today who just because of their experience can, avoid going to a machine. But I don't think for very long, because what they are advising will very soon become, sort of not high value, won't remain high value. So I think it's a blend. And in India, to your point, yes, robo-advisory is still a bit far off. There are a lot of platforms available and the adoption rates have started picking up. But I worked briefly in Singapore, and I can tell you even there, robo-advisory was not, the kind of assumption that one could make. There was still a lot of value placed in the human advisor. And when I talk to my customers, they tell me the same thing, that why just, wealth or equity markets, even in the forex markets or even in lending, today providing a line of credit is not doing your job. You have to kind of advise that customer on their business and their sector. You should be able to share some insight, some perspective. Now, how do you get perspectives and insights on so many sectors and so many industries? I don't think it's humanly possible to understand everything. So that's where, again, the human advisors are also relying on machines to do a lot of that data crunching, analyze, bring it to an insight level, something that, they can share with their customers. And yes, people still like, people telling them things, but it's going to change.
Yeah, I think very well answered. We are moving towards that, but yes, the blend is still there. And you talked about data, and you talked about a lot of information available today. So you have internal data, external data, structured data, and unstructured data. So I will talk about the unstructured data.
Sure.
So how you use that and how you make that useful for the customer. I think that is.
Sure. So I think just, for the sake of setting context, when we talk about unstructured data, we are primarily talking about largely text data. Correct. And text data, occurs in different forms. So it could be news, but it could also be the transcript of a company's, results. It could even be emails. It could be anything, that has been communicated from one point to another using text as the primary, medium. Now, there was a time when unstructured data had to be eyeballed. So people, used to read news to make sense of it and make a decision. And when, you're using products like the ones we offer to the industry, Workspace or Icon, these are our solutions, they have news coming in at the same time from over 300 sources. So 300 news providers, news lines, running on your screen. It's practically impossible to eyeball and make sense of it. And that's the time around which algos started playing a role. So algos were created exactly for this purpose, that what a human being, can't process in a second, an algo can. And therefore, an algo was going and executing a trade based on all the news it was reading. So the demand came from, the human side of things, that how do we kind of go a bit, ahead of eyeballing data. And that's where companies like ours started investing in machine learning 10, 15 years back. So for a lot of people, it may appear that, AI and machine learning is something that happened in the last 2 or 3 years, but that's not true. A lot of firms, a lot of businesses have been investing in these kind of technologies for decades now. So we started our machine learning and artificial intelligence journey over a decade ago, when we started taking all the Reuters news, which was unstructured data, and we started turning it into structured form, something that could be analyzed. Now, here's how it became more interesting. To begin with, what you could do is take a whole lot of news. Let's say, you are researching a particular stock, and every piece of news related to that stock you bring together, you break down, the words, and you literally assign a weightage to every word appearing in that news. Now, how do you do that? You have to first build what is called a financial lexicon. So just the way today, worse as a word in a news means for you that something bad has happened. In a financial context, these words can change the meaning. It could also mean that, something good has happened, right? So you have to contextually understand every word of English language in the financial context. So we created a lexicon which literally gave weightage to English words, but in the financial context. And once we had done that, we could actually arrive at a sentiment, whether this particular piece of news is positive or is it negative. So that's where it all started. We started building, a positive, negative sentiment based on analysis of hundreds, sometimes thousands of news reports, headlines, the entire body of the news. So that's where it started. But very quickly, it has transformed to something way beyond that. So today, you'll be surprised that you can create an index out of every human emotion using unstructured data. What does that mean? It means that until yesterday, I could just say whether this is positive or negative, right? Today, I can actually tell you how much trust is evoked, in that particular news, or how much risk is expressed in a particular news, or if there's a tweet or a blog, how much, joy or sorrow is being expressed. And we build indices out of these human emotions. So you can practically create a graph of human emotions across, unstructured data. So it's reached, to that extent. And what do you do with all of this? You basically use these indices to map them to different, financial market indices, like say an S&P 500 or a Nifty 50. And then you see how this emotional index works in relation to an actual stock index. And based on the correlations, you make trading decisions. So it's reached, to that extent. So unstructured data is no longer, unstructured.
Yeah.
It's gotten way beyond, it's gone way beyond structure to analytics and insights.
Yeah. So that's what I was telling you. Years back, I think we used to hear from
Yes.
people like you in our treasury, but as you are telling now, it has become this line.
Yes.
So, you were talking about your rural connection. So maybe a little bit more on that, because so far what we have heard is all talking to all big people, selling complex, exotic solution.
Yeah.
So maybe on the other side, what you were telling some interesting thing.
Sure.
I want you to share that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd love to. It's also one of the more interesting parts of whatever I've done in the last couple of decades. I think people underestimate the amount of opacity that exists in certain markets. So all of us kind of buy agri commodities, and a slight increase or decrease in prices makes us so uncomfortable, right? We love to haggle and bargain with the guy, the vegetable vendor. It's one of the favorite pastimes in India. You first ask the price and then you haggle and kind of make sure that guy goes home crying, right? Because that gives us some kind of pleasure. But you'll be kind of appalled if you go on to the other side, from where those agri commodities come. And I come from a background, my parents were the first generation migrants to Mumbai. My grandparents were literally working in the farm, so I come from a very, very sort of ordinary agricultural background in that sense. And I've seen all my life that space very closely. And I could never understand, as a kid, that why are people generally so dejected around our villages, right? It's not like the cities, cities, people are very exuberant, they're celebrating, they're cheerful in general. Villages, it's not like that, it's not like the village you see in Bollywood movies. You should go live in a tiny village, you will get a true sense of how many concerns and stresses and anxieties, people live with because there's less money, and money is important beyond a point. I mean, we can all say after we have earned a certain amount of money that money doesn't matter. But, when you are living in a 5,000 people village, money matters. It's needed for the essentials. Now, what happens on the other side is the opacity in the markets doesn't allow the producer to ever determine the price. As a factory owner, I don't know if you can imagine a producer of any product or service anywhere in the world who cannot determine the price. Is it possible? I mean, has anyone come across an example of any commodity produced in the world that is not priced by its manufacturer? Is there anything? I don't think so, right? Sorry? I thought there was a commodity. I was discovering something new. Even water is priced, right? In a bottle, it's for 25 bucks, right? MRP. That doesn't happen with agri-commodities. And to a great extent in markets, where the procurement does not take place through a very structured or, through what you call a very sophisticated procurement process, it is always a challenge. It just cannot be determined at the production level. So what happens is the entire pricing is dependent on the buyer side. And that's because of the lack of, transparency. It's because of the lack of regulation as well. I mean, you don't have sufficient regulation in agri markets. So if the price of onion drops or the price of onion rises, it does not trigger off the same level of or same alarm bells that get rung off, if a stock's price falls or rises to that extent. And there are many good reasons why, it's not over-regulated, etc. But at the end, the producer does not kind of, get any say in how the price is made. So that's a very strange kind of, system, strange market. My little bit of contribution there was we decided that how do we bring more symmetry to this information on both sides? Because it's a lot of asymmetry, right? One side doesn't even know what's the price for tomorrow. So we started actually gathering data from where the trades were happening, and we wanted to get that data across real time to the producers to see if, looking at the data, they might negotiate slightly better. They still may not be able to demand a price, but, at least they are not unaware of what's the price. So we started collecting data, and we started with, some common commodities, and eventually we covered almost every commodity that's traded, 40, 50 different commodities across the country. And while we were doing this work, we were not, able to fathom what's the impact of this on the producers. But interestingly, a World Bank, delegation arrived in India, and they were looking at various factors for funding the country, and one of them was how are these countries, agri-commodity markets doing? And they chose us as a pilot for their research. And they actually traced the impact of giving data, simply giving, information to farmers. And we were not giving only pricing, we were also giving lots of insights. So we were also giving news and advisory, and this is all on text messages. You can't probably, this generation can't even imagine opening their SMS inbox for every piece of information, but that was the only thing available. And this, research team found that the impact was as high as 10 to 15% on an average on people's incomes. So this is again a median, right? There are people who probably made even 70, 80% more because they received, certain news in time. They were able to kind of divert, their produce to another market. Because a lot of times what happens is, the produce leaves the farm and something goes wrong in that market where it's headed. There's a strike, or, there's a flash flood, or so many things can go wrong. And then if you reach there and you've paid for the transport and you've paid for the harvesting, there is no way that you can negotiate, a price, right? You're just going to sell at whatever you're being asked for. And that's why you read all these news about tomato being sold at half a rupee and sometimes, 5 paisa and kg and things like that. So, the producer doesn't have a choice, right? So we tried to bring a lot of that transparency. For me, those 3 to 4 years that I spent, in that space really opened my eyes to what information asymmetry does, but also what, good data insights can do for any kind of market. And this is probably the most unstructured market that one can think of.
That's why I want you to. So data is oil anyway, we know that. So changing gears. So maybe as a leader, all rosy thing or sometimes setbacks, sometimes uncertain times. So do you recall anything where you led the team in those times? Anything comes to your mind?
Yeah, I think there'll hardly be a person in any business, who doesn't come across, difficult years or difficult situations. And many a times, these things are not dependent on how you run your business. It's not always dependent on that. It's also dependent on a lot of external factors. The pandemic was one such, external factor that I think every business had to deal with. For me, personally, I think the pandemic was one period where we were kind of, unsure of where business will go, where our customers' business will go. And it seemed, for a few months that will everything just shut down, right? Is this the end, right? Everybody was so kind of hopeless at one point. But I think we all came through it. But for me, I think the bigger challenge really was after pandemic, equity markets doing so amazing. Banking actually came through much better than pre-pandemic. I mean, this year, every bank is booking, 50% plus net profits. So I think nobody actually came out badly. For us, one of our, key platforms, however, was to be sunset. And that meant, a lot of concern for my team. How do we sort of, deal with this? And it was one of the most challenging times for me, that something that contributed in a large way to my business was being sunset, as in, end of life. You're not going to sell this product this year. And you have a team that's just come out of the pandemic, and raring to go out there and sell, and you're being told this product, now cannot be sold. How do you kind of handle this situation? I mean, the numbers part, to be honest, is easy. Believe me, as all of you, get into business and go on to becoming managers and sales managers and whatnot, you'll realize that you can manage the numbers, but you can't, manage people. That's the difficult part. And when I say manage people, I mean people's motivation. It's a very, very difficult task, especially, in bad times, your leadership gets challenged. In good times, everybody's a good leader, right? Because things are going well, so everybody's being applauded, everybody's being rewarded, everybody's, being asked to speak at places and all of that. But when it comes, to the bad times, that's when, your leadership really gets questioned. And for me, it was one of those times where, how do you get people's motivation back, right? That with what we have, we can still make through the year, we can get through, we can still kind of, come out, looking good. And it requires a lot of negotiation internally for people to look at your business outcomes, in a certain context. So I think as a leader, first of all, you have to set expectations correctly with your management. I think you have to be able to convey the context in which you are operating, the conditions in which, you are kind of managing things. And that's the leader's job. I don't think the people on the ground can do it. The leader has to, kind of convey that context very clearly, set expectations clearly, and then with what you have, how you can maximize. And that's where, people's motivation comes into question. Are your people motivated enough to do things in the way that you're asking them to do? And for that, you couldn't have been a bad leader the earlier year, right? So people are not going to work for you in the next year. So A, you have to be consistently good with people. But for me, it was one of those years, and I think what we did is simply get people to collaborate better. And we did it through a number of things, starting with, collaboration workshops, in which we got people to understand each other's roles clearly. There's sometimes, so much lack of clarity in organizations around each other's roles. People are constantly in conflict. So we got people to understand each other's roles better. We got people to also work for common incentives. So we changed the incentive structures a bit. We got people to also come out with problems, more openly and not sort of struggle with it. We did a lot of mental health programs, workshops, because I think we undermine how much people are dealing with stress. And a lot of organizations may not necessarily actively, engage in these kind of programs, but we did a lot of workshops around it, continue to do so. I think all of that was, to me, the key to us succeeding in that year, than simply, doing the other thing which I could have done, which is, you go with a stick, right? You say that it's a bad year, and if you don't do this number, you're getting fired, you're getting fired, you're getting fired. I don't think that could have produced results.
Would not work. That would not work. So you talked about people motivation, you talked about how you led your people. So what we also do sitting here, because our people join you and obviously we take feedback. So maybe instead of asking you, I have someone here, I think I would request him to speak. How has been your experience working with Ranjit or London Stock Exchange? Can someone give mic?
Hello. So far it's been good. There are three things that stand out. In the next 6 or 7 months, most of you all will be in foreign banks, Indian banks, FMCG companies, and I have friends all over. But when I talk to them, I've realized that three major things differentiate LSEG from other companies. One is the access. What I mean by access is we have our MD and CEO here. Not average person doesn't get to become this. But as an employee who's just joined, I have access to everyone. I can actually go and ask any amount of questions I want. Sometimes I've even pestered them too much. But, so yeah, it becomes easier. Second thing is the opportunity. LSEG actually gives us the opportunity to be a part of every event. Not the happy events, but even the negative events, even bad events. That's how life works. We are given equal opportunity to sit and be a part of each and every event. The third thing is support. When I was about to join LSEG, I was really scared whether they would be able to support me because I'm pursuing CFA as well. But today morning I gave my CFA exam, and Ranjit, as well as the entire team, has not only taken off work off my this thing, but as well as been extremely supportive whenever I've needed it. So yeah, these are the main three things that have differentiated LSEG from every other company.
So from horse's mouth, so they want you. Now you have to what competency you are looking. So what is your advice? People who want to join a company like yours.
Sure.
So what are the 2-3 things you would advise them?
Certainly, I think it would not be justice done if I leave without, sharing what do your prospective employers expect. And probably you all are patiently listening to me so far so that I finally arrive at this point. And it's right. I mean, it's also our responsibility as employers to go out there and talk to people and set, our expectations out very transparently. So I'm going to say something, again, which is a lot of it is my personal opinion. It's not necessarily how LSEG alone views, competencies. But I think the first and most important competency to me in today's world is articulation. And it may come as a surprise to a lot of people, especially those of you who are, from very strong technical background and are looking to, do technical roles as well. Even in those technical roles, even if they are not frontline customer-facing roles, I think you will still need to have, very good articulation. And when I say articulation, I mean the ability to express any idea, any suggestion, or any vision that you have in a way that, a room full of people who know nothing about it can also understand. I think that is the first quality that everybody has to build. And I was reading somewhere that, why are more and more, rich, wealthy people in the world sending their kids to liberal arts? Okay. Question that I also keep asking sometimes. But I think one of the reasons is this, that articulation is what you develop in some of those courses. And that articulation, becomes almost like a winning or losing point in a boardroom at some point in your career and your life, or could be in a customer's, conference room. How well you're able to communicate your point across to the other person without complicating it, without making it sound too complex. And you don't have to necessarily, be a child from a wealthy family to go to liberal arts or even go to liberal arts, okay? You can develop articulation and communication on your own wherever you are. And the key to that is, I think, reading good content, listening to good content, communicating to people who you think are very good with articulation. The more and more you test yourself against those people, you will learn from them. But I would say the first thing you should develop is articulation. Without even the core technical skills, you'll be amazed how many interviews, how many jobs you can crack because people on the other side are just looking for a person who can understand well and explain well. That's the very basic skill. Second thing, I would say is whatever field you want to get into, understand that field, read about that field with a voracious appetite. Don't undermine how much, the other person knows. And people out there are today using all sorts of, data tools to do this. So from chat GPTs to everything. So, sounding smart is no longer difficult, let me tell you. It's the depth that gets questioned. You can sound very smart. You can throw a lot of numbers because you read chat GPT before entering that interview. One question on your depth and you can, lose that opportunity. So depth will only come if you truly research a subject. And I can tell you from my own experience, I had zero understanding of financial markets. I still don't think I have knowledge or understanding like sir of the markets. But whenever I got an opportunity, I would spend weekends going into office and reading on the subject that I have to talk to the customer about. And I still do it. And I think that's the second thing you should do. Research, your subject to the extent possible. Third thing, which is something that everybody expects in the person sitting across the table, you have to be hungry, right? You have to show a certain degree of hunger. And if you're not hungry, someone said a nice line the other day. One of our customers was in office, and I think Devam or one of our, new sales grads asked him a question that, any advice for us? He was a very senior guy. He said, yeah, be hungry or you will be lunch, right? So if you're not hungry, somebody else is, going to take away whatever that is, the job or opportunity or whatever it is away from you. So I would say be hungry, show that hunger as well, and don't ever kind of, become complacent. Even if, you think you have everything it takes to do or appear for a certain job, I think try to talk to people in that field and understand even more. Try to sort of also show vulnerability when you go for interviews. Don't try to come across as a person who knows everything and therefore, there's nothing that, I couldn't do if you hire me. I think you have to be vulnerable and say things that you don't know. People appreciate honesty, believe me. So I think those are 2-3 things I would say. Sorry, I didn't give any technical.
This is not 2-3 things. These are golden words.
competencies.
I think all of us agree. These are golden words. I think core knowledge has become like hygiene.
Yeah.
You're supposed to know, even if you don't know, the employer doesn't bother. He will teach you.
Yeah.
But this people skill, the communication, I think that matters. And in your job, obviously, yes. Okay, I think we will finish this section here. Maybe a small rapid fire.
Okay.
So you're on hot seat now. Okay, very small answers. So any favorite book you have read?
Lots. But the one I'm reading recently is a book by a hedge fund, very successful hedge fund owner, Ray Dalio.
Yeah.
It's called Principles of Dealing with the Changing World Order. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend that one.
Great book, yeah. So you watch movies or only Netflix, OTT?
Yes, absolutely.
Which movie you recently watched or any favorite actor?
Tough one again. I like a lot of movies. I spend indiscriminate time watching Netflix.
One movie which has...
I would say movies that made an impression on me. Maybe Shawshank Redemption is my favorite movie, and Tim Robbins in that movie. I think it's a movie that can inspire anyone, despite whatever level. And it's a very cliched response, to be honest. I think
We wanted short response. That's good enough.
So I'm sorry
Yeah.
if I disappointed.
No. So you are a mountain person or a beach person? Travel
Mountain or a beach? Mountain, yeah.
more mountain. Okay. Any travel destination on your bucket list now?
Yeah, from a hilly region kind of perspective, I definitely want to see the Swiss Alps once. That's one of the things I want to do. Last year I did a bit of northeastern India and we walked a lot through Meghalaya.
Oh.
That was a fantastic experience. I would recommend it to anyone.
So if not here, where you would have been? If not this career?
Oh, if not this career, I think I would have been doing teaching probably.
Oh, great. Okay, if you could swap lives with someone for a day, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Wow, big question. I would probably swap my life for Beethoven,
Oh,
because I truly love Western classical. I studied it for many years. I learned the piano, and to me, he's a very inspiring figure. Somebody who, with literally towards the end of his career, with half a year, could still produce some of the best symphonies. So yeah, I would probably swap with him.
great. Your favorite comfort food, like you look at it and you just want to have it.
Varan Bath.
Okay. So if you have some superpower, what would you do with it? If you get to change something and you have the power, what you would want to do?
I'd probably make, like what I started out with, right? I would probably get people to respect every living thing. I'd probably get people to recognize intelligence in every living thing. I think that's what we truly need today, as a human race. So that's probably
I think great answer. I think we should. Okay, so I should stop here, and now I think we get into some audience question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. But we will anyway have some audience question.
We have one at the back.
Hello?
Hello, am I
Yeah.
audible? Yes.
Yeah, hello? Can
Sorry.
Sorry?
Okay. Yeah. Let it go. Hi, my name is Nikhil Pawar, and it was very intriguing sort of a thing when you told me that there's so much data that now you can even map out how a human behavior trying to predict sort of a thing. So the kind of power that you get with it is totally unimaginable. I mean, it's really immense. As a firm and as a leader, there's so much power that you hold that there are things that you can predict and you can change and you can have real-time data with you. So it really comes with a lot of responsibility, since you being the face and having a firm as such that you're leading. So I mean, how do you manage it, or at the same time, what is that responsibility that you have? And I think there's a lot of accountability at the same time, that comes with it when you have so much power and position. So if you could talk about that a little.
Sure, I think great question. And it's a very big question for all the organizations that today deal with data. And we have seen how misuse of data, can literally, topple governments across the world, right? And I don't know if all of you are big fans of Yuval Harari, but if you're not, I would say please read some of his books on how data is changing, the species that we are itself. Uh, so coming to, us like as an organization or any organization like ours for that matter, I think one thing I learned very early on at Reuters, and one of my editorial chiefs told me is there was a principle in Reuters called get it first, but first get it right. So Reuters has been known for all its history for breaking news, but they were very, very focused on how you get that news and whether that news has been validated with multiple sources before you break that news. So I think it's the same for analytics or for insights. How you're delivering, how you're kind of arriving at that point of delivery is something that companies like ours spend millions of dollars making sure the right checks are in place, because one slip from us could devastate people, lives, industries. So we have to be very careful. We have a very strong compliance, framework around these things. But I think eventually it boils down to people's personal ethics. And that's why we are also as an organization very, very focused on, ethics and compliance in our people. So those are few ways, in which we manage it.
Yeah. I'm Abha. Yeah. Thanks, Ranjit, for your profound advice and the kind of conversation that we had over here. My question is more of a business question. So you talked about the producer not getting the right. You talked about the producer not getting the right to demand the what is due. Now here, I would like to understand that what is the approach, because there are two, I think, basic challenges which must be coming. Is one is the technology adoption and the financial inclusion. So these must be the two prior things or the major challenges that are there. So how are you dealing with them, and how are you able to disseminate, and how are you able to sell your products to the masses with these kind of huge challenges?
Sure. So I'll probably just clarify, what I was talking about was also something I did in the past. It's not something that the London Stock Exchange Group does anymore. But if your question is, I understand your question is particularly around the agricultural supply chain.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll speak from a personal point of view. This is nothing to do with my organization. I'm very passionate about, first of all, the agri supply chain. I think there are a couple of things that are needed to bring, a balance to that market. First, I think governments and regulators need to kind of step in and bring in, a certain degree of checks on how pricing itself is determined. If we can do it, for the most complex products in the world and for the most complex financial instruments in the world, I can't see why we can't do it for a simple commodity where we understand the production process, where we can literally monitor, the supply, where we can understand the demand from, historical data. So I think firstly we need to bring a little bit of, regulation and control on that. And then the second thing I would say is also setting the right expectations on the other side. I think producers are also misled many times. There was a time when, people were being asked to produce literally anything. Like somebody would walk up to a farmer and say, you know what, you start breeding emus and you will make a fortune. And people also walk into these traps, right? I've seen villages where people have hundreds of emus. Do you know what is an emu? It's a bird as large as an ostrich. And suddenly there's a village with 100 emus. Now, how do you kind of, set expectations there? So you also got to, kind of inform the producers about such traps. People come every year with a new variety of some vegetable or fruit and start selling it, and people also buy it and start growing it, and then they don't get the prices, and then they get very disappointed. So I think there's a lot of knowledge and understanding also that needs to be built on the other side. So I think producers need to be more knowledgeable, markets need to be more transparent and regulated, And I think in between, to your point of technology, there have to be platforms where people can actually put up, their supply, people can express their demand. Why can't these transactions, be electronified? I think we have to get there. We're far way off.
Thank you.
Okay, you can be first and then.
Good evening, sir. My question is about the pyramid you talked about: data, information, analytics, insights, and advisory.
Wow, you're the only guy listening to me.
So, as I'm also starting on the journey of analytics, so could you give some advice about each step, each pyramid level to me? Some advice. What should I focus on?
Which of these should you focus
no,
on?
at every step.
Okay.
So
Wow,
one thing that you could focus on, and that
It's a
has
short
to be
answer
right.
he wants, not a very big answer.
That has to be right at every step of the way.
Okay. I'll try to answer. I don't
You're
think
not
I can
articulated
satisfy your query.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a
So
very
try
deep
to
one.
give it a brief
Yeah,
answer.
no, sure. So if I understand you correctly, you want to understand how do you get it right? If you're building a model or an information model?
Like you mentioned, the get it first and get it right.
Okay.
So in that step, in the data pyramid data
How do you get it
part, which is the thing that you should focus on to get it that it is right.
Okay,
So like that for every step.
sure. So let me try to keep it short. I think we are probably out of time as well. So I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I think the first and foremost thing is sourcing of data. So how do you source data determines, the outcome. So if you are sourcing from a poor quality source, so for example, if you want to get into news, or you want to get into even pricing data, if you don't have the right source, you will never be able to give the right outcome. Now, finding the right source is not an easy task. You have to test out multiple sources. There are various quality, parameters that you can use to validate if, the discrepancy between different sources is minimal, is very high. You have to kind of arrive at, okay, these are the 2 or 3 sources which, you would want to rely on consistently. Once you've done that, I think you also need to look at what exactly is the expected outcome of your analysis. Just analyzing in thin air doesn't make sense. So from our perspective, for example, when we provide, data on bonds or on Forex instruments, we know exactly what our customers do with it. So we provide them those analytical tools which actually help them, which are meaningful. So you also have to, create tools that not only you but even the end user can kind of use very easily. Today it's very easy with Power, BI apps and all of that. It's lessened the degree to which you have to invest in building analytic tools. Then if you are going the next step, which is, insights, that's the tough part, which most industry players are trying to crack. How do you turn data into insights? And that's not very easy. So that's where you have to bring unstructured data, you have to bring structured data, you have to bring a whole lot of knowledge and expertise from a domain perspective into it to actually deliver insights. So it may sound very vague, and I'm just trying to explain in a very short way, but I think that's the process to kind of, getting a step above in that pyramid. I don't know if it helps. Okay, thanks.
Hello, sir. Good evening. And this was really a very insightful session. This is Ekta Goyal. I have a question regarding artificial intelligence. So we are having a conversation around human intelligence. I want to ask you, how is artificial intelligence impacting human intelligence? Because I have also come across this viewpoint that artificial intelligence is day by day, somehow in some or the other way, making human beings lazy. Like they are making somewhat, how should I say, like totally dependent on the machines for almost all the things. So
Right.
what is your take on this, and what is your opinion about the same?
Yeah, I think you're asking me a question which, the biggest of thinkers are trying to solve right now. I'll give you my take on it for whatever it's worth. I think if you know the purpose of what you're trying to do, you'll probably use it in the most creative and the most productive way. But it all depends on, what is the outcome that you're aiming at. So if your aim is to get past, a conversation, and like I said earlier, if you just want to look smart, AI can make you look smart. You can walk into a conversation, throw some big words, throw some big, numbers, come out of it looking very great. But believe me, human beings are still important because human beings can see through another human being. So when you throw these numbers and these terms and there's no depth to what you're saying, the other person is actually able to see that. So you don't actually come out, you may come out looking smart but not necessarily successful. So you have to be very clear what you're using AI for. I'll give you an example. A lot of students today, are using chat GPTs in schools as well to write their essays and whatnot. The funny thing is, the kids who are actually doing a good job writing by themselves are sometimes getting penalized because some teachers can't believe that they can write so well. So it happened with my son. He wrote like a 5-page answer to a question, and he loves, history and politics and all of that. He wrote a 5-page answer to a small question, and his teacher said, "You've not written this." He said, "No, but I wrote this." And she said, "No, this has to be from chat GPT." So, it's kind of leading to a lot of mistrust, but I think if you're clear about your outcome, you'll use it creatively. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful session. I'm a faculty here and I have a question. Maybe I'll get a lot of help from you. Many times when we are looking at the subject on analytics, students are, they're fascinated by the how, which is to know these techniques, ML, AI, ML, or mediation, moderation. But typically my experience in the industry tells me that it's very hard to define the right business problem, come up with a good hypothesis, and then do the storytelling in their language so that they're inspired to act on your insights. If you were in my place because you wanted to swap the profession and teaching, how would you really solve these two problems in a classroom or in any way? How do you get the business problem and hypothesis right, and how do you do a storytelling so that they act, the leaders like you act? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Probably the toughest one was kept for the end. Maybe I'll again try to be as brief as I can. I have a difficulty with being brief, but I'll try. I think the first step, and we had a really wonderful workshop the last 2 days in our business, trying to solve exactly this problem. Because our people are sometimes really great with our products, with our solutions, right? But when we are telling that to a customer, we are so engrossed in our product and our solution that we don't even ask the customer what they want, right? So I think it starts with getting the deepest possible understanding of what the problem is and asking a lot of the questions that you may not be asking, right? So I think starts with questioning, starts with gathering, the right information, the right, insights from the customer or whoever it could be, that you're solving the problem for. I think bringing it back, then sort of looking at it from a lens, again, of solving, not from a lens of, because now I've got a nice problem to solve, and because I understand, this bit of analytics, let me throw everything at that, what I understand. It could mean that you have to actually step out of your comfort zone and learn something new. It could also mean that, you have to collaborate with someone else who knows, a big part of that problem solving. You may not be sufficient to solve that problem. And I think that iteration is very important. It may not be the final solution as well, what you go with. So how do you kind of iterate with, the end user or whoever your customer is very essential. And I think the last thing is being vulnerable to saying that I don't understand what you're asking for. Can you explain better? I think most people miss that step, and that's why they end up giving, very average or mediocre solutions, because they haven't even bothered to ask what the other person is expecting in very clear, succinct manner. So maybe that's my only high-level advice. I can't talk to data analytics like you can.
So I think we should take a moon break for 5 minutes.
Sure.
So I think it's our day of scientists today. So data scientist here and space scientist here. So let's witness this next 5 minutes.
I think it's 5 minutes away. Amazing.
Great, I think. I think, historic moment for us.
It's so amazing to sit there right now.
Okay,
Fantastic.
great, thanks. So we celebrated with the data scientist and the space scientist here. So I think we should remember this. Great.
Thank you.
All, Ashmita.
Thank you, sir. So on behalf of KJSIM Institute of Management, I would like to invite Professor Smita Ramakrishna ma'am to express our gratitude.
It is indeed my privilege to read out the scroll written for our esteemed guest. Mr. Ranjit Pawar, in many ways, your journey resembles a finely crafted analytical model. Each decision a variable, each challenge a data point, and each triumph a validation of your method. Your path, much like the data you navigate, is one that's led by insights and peppered with perfect decision making, a true demonstration of the art and science of leadership. Your inspiring career shows how you've decoded the algorithm to success in the world of data analytics. Your ability to analyze complex situations, unravel intricate patterns, and deliver actionable solutions is nothing short of phenomenal. In the realm of business, you're shown us that numbers do indeed speak, and they speak eloquently through your expertly guided strategies. Beyond the technical aspects, your emphasis on maintaining a work-life balance and your commitment to continuous learning highlighted the holistic approach to success. Your insights on nurturing relationships and leveraging networks underscore the significance of building strong professional connections. We thank you for your time, openness, and willingness to share your knowledge. Your wisdom will undoubtedly shape our perspective and contribute to our students' growth. Sincerely, KJSIM.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. It's so lovely. Yeah, probably I can hold it. Yeah? All right, sure, sure. I can just put this in. Thank you. Good. Thank you so much. Oh, really? Okay.
Also, I'd request Gaurav to come forward with the mug, which we would like you, sir, to sign as a memento for us.
Oh, okay. Sure. Do we sign like this? It's so tough to sign on this. Thank you. Okay, just me? Okay. Thank you. Sure, sure, sure. No worries.
And I also request Arun sir to present Ranjit sir with the autobiography of KJ Somaiya as a token of appreciation.
The founder. Thank you so much.
I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to Mr. Ranjit Pawar for gracing us with his presence and enlightening us with such words of wisdom. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Arun sir for his invaluable contribution to the third lecture of our initiative, Careers and Conversation. Your insights have made the event truly remarkable, sir. I would like to extend thanks to Arvind sir, Krupa ma'am, Smita Ramakrishna ma'am, Meenal ma'am, and the technical team for ensuring the success of the event with their remarkable efforts. Furthermore, I want to acknowledge the continuous support from the PR and Branding Committee as well as the Alumni Committee. To everyone present here, students and faculty, I thank you all for joining us for this enlightening session and being such a great audience. I guess we'll now stop the live stream as well. Thank you for your